First class of the winter semester on this course called Biblical Reflections, Finding Yourself in the Stories of Genesis. It's going to be an 8-part series for our winter semester, 8 Monday evenings. It's a pleasure being back with you if you're with me for the fall semester. And for those first joining us for the first time, I welcome you to the Conejo Jewish Academy. I hope it's going to be the first of many learning opportunities that you experience with us. Our goal is to open the Torah and Judaism so that you can find the beauty and the brilliance of our heritage. And we hope that this will whet your appetite for further growth in your own participation, your own level of observance in Judaism. Our philosophy at the Academy is that each and every single one of us must continue climbing, growing, studying. There is no such thing as, in our opinion, of a Class A Jew or a Class B Jew or a higher Jew or a lower Jew or a 25% Jew or a 100% Jew. There's only one Jew. And through circumstances and providence, we find ourselves, some of us more knowledgeable and some less knowledgeable. It's our task for all of us to work to gain more knowledge, to put effort into it, so that we can make our own choices when it comes to Jewish observance, and we can make them not out of ignorance, but as educated Jews. So welcome. For those that have taken classes with me before, the course Biblical Reflections is slightly different, a different style than my Wednesday lunch class. In that class, I delve into every single verse and every single word. Here, we're not going into every verse. Rather, we're using the verses and the text of the Torah to try to find deeper meaning in the stories of the book of Genesis. I want to begin with an odd story told in the Talmud. The Talmud tells us a story about a Rabbi Bar Chama. And it says that he was on a ship. He was traveling on a long journey. We were tired, he said. We were exhausted. And suddenly we saw an island. And it looked like a nice island to rest and relax a little. It had sand, it had grass. It looked beautiful. It had some vegetation even, it had some shade, so we stopped. We got off the ship and we went onto this island. After a few hours, we became hungry. We had some fish, so we decided to make a barbecue. We gathered some logs together, we started a little fire, and we began our cookout. Mitamol, as they say in Yiddish, all of a sudden, the island begins to move. At first, very slowly, but then the movement became stronger and stronger, and it began tilting from side to side until it turned over completely, throwing all of us into the ocean. Luckily, we weren't very far from the ship, and we all managed to swim back safely. And then we saw that the island was never an island, but the island indeed was this tremendous fish. And we must have in some way disturbed it from its long, deep sleep when we started the fire on its back. That's the story in the Talmud. If this wasn't a story from the Talmud, we would dismiss it as a fairy tale fitting for some childish cartoon, perhaps. It looks like an island that had shade, that had this, it had that. We got on the island, and then the island was a fish. Maybe a horror movie. But this is part of the Talmud. It's part of Jewish tradition. It's part of Jewish learning. What's the story all about? And as in many midrashic stories, there's really a message that the story is trying to tell us. We learn so much from stories. Stories our grandparents told us, stories the Torah tells us, stories from the Talmud, stories from the Medrash. It's our task to look deeper into the story and say, what's the message? And what's the message personally for me? What do I get from this story? So let's take a look at this Rabba bar bar Chama Talmudic story, and then we're going to get into the story of Noah, the focus tonight. You see, the metaphor of that story is the metaphor of our people, of the Jewish people. The Jewish people are on a ship. They're on a mission. And it's been a long, tiring journey. God put Abraham on a boat 3,700 years ago, and he's told him to set sail. And he and his small family got on this boat, got on the ship with a mission statement, the Torah. The Torah is our map. The Torah is our compass. And if we follow the course outlined for us, we can, and we have, and we will change the world, revolutionize the world. And for years and decades and centuries and millenniums, we have been on the ship. At times, it's been calm waters. At times, the sea has been turbulent and ferocious, its waves roaring. It feels at times as if the journey is endless. And every once in a while, we see this island, and we think to ourselves, that looks like a good place to get off the ship. Look, we're just going and going and going. It seems endless. What's it all for? It seems to just cause anti-Semitism. People just hate us for it. So let's get off the ship. Let's get onto that island, enjoy life a little bit, have a barbecue, take a suntan, be normal, eat, sleep, and be merry and die. Why stay on the ship? And we've seen these islands throughout our history in Babylonia, in Spain, in Turkey, in Germany. Wherever we've gone, we've experimented with getting off the ship to relax on an island, only to find out that the island wasn't an island. And what seemed so promising in Berlin and in France, or wherever it may be, the island turned over on us. It wasn't an island for us. And we were thrown into the sea and went swimming for our lives, for our survival. And so finally, our ship brought us to the shores of this great land, land of the free, the United States of America, a nation that's indeed a blessed land, a country that is built in large part by the influences of our ship, of our message, of our values, of our teachings. As President Adams said about the Jewish people, they are the most glorious nation that ever inhabited this earth. The Romans and their empire were but a Babel in comparison to the Jews. They have given religion to 3/4 of the globe and have influenced the affairs of mankind more and more happily than any other ancient nation or modern nation. The founding fathers studied Judaic law. They studied Jewish values. They studied Jewish philosophy, and they incorporated them into what we know today as the Constitution. But my friends, with all the security and with all the freedom that our country has given us, we must never lose sight of the fact that we are still on our ship, that our mission did not end with our arrival in the shores of this great land. If anything, our mission has intensified. So this is not the time to get off and to assimilate completely into island life. This is not a time for us to abandon our mission, to walk away from Judaism, to retire our ship to the Maritime Museum, to reduce us to some books of ancient history gathering dust in some attic. I remember the first year I was out here, I believe it was 1983. I was asked to speak to a group of Hebrew school children at a Reform temple. The rabbi was a dear friend of mine. And he introduced me to the students. And in his introduction, he said to the kids the following, and he said it out of love. He said, remember, students, we spoke about the tefillin that Jews used to wear. Well, he still wears them. And the kids were so fascinated. It was like having a visitor from the 17th century, like having someone from Amish town visiting their school. And the first question, you really put on those boxes? And I said, well, actually, they're not so old. They make new ones today. But the point I was trying to make to the kids and to my friend, the rabbi, is it's not something of the past. We're still on the ship, even here in America, or even more so because we're in this great land of the United States of America. The ship is still going. The mission is still on. The mitzvot, the Torah is still so much alive. I remember, I'm sure some of you from this neighborhood remember when they opened the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley. I had the honor of installing a menorah before its grand opening at the Reagan Presidential Library. I got a beautiful letter from the President and First Lady, which hangs up in the Chabad house, thanking me for the gift of the menorah that has remained in the Presidential Library. So I was asked then if I wanted a private tour. And I said, of course, certainly. And I still remember one of the exhibits, and they changed the exhibits all the time, but at that particular time when they first opened, one of the featured exhibits was showcases displaying the many gifts that the President and First Lady received from heads of state during their tenure at the White House. And these were stunning gifts. I mean, they were made of gold and silver and crystals and precious stones. And they were all on display behind these decorative showcases with the perfect lighting. And it was explained to me by the individual giving me this private tour that the president may not take these gifts with him or her someday after their presidency, but they remain the property of the United States government. So even though heads of state are coming to the White House and presenting the gifts to the president, they don't really become the property of the president. They remain the property of the United States of America. And the government allows the museums dedicated to these presidents to hold on to these gifts and to show them in showcases, but they remain the property of the US government. So all that will come from these gifts is that they'll be on display perhaps for 30 days of a year or 30 days of 5 years, and then back into some storage house. So during those 30 days, we can marvel at the splendor and the beauty of these gifts, but only from a distance, from behind the glass wall. And it dawned on me, isn't it strange? What a shame. Such precious pieces, priceless gifts, and all that will ever be gained from them is a moment of grandeur from a passing visitor in a museum. That's it. We, the Jewish people, were given an extremely precious and priceless gift. The gift came from the head of all states, from the King of all kings, from God Almighty himself. And he presented us with a Torah, the greatest gift of all time. And he gave it to us on Mount Sinai 3,333 years ago. However, unlike the gifts in the showcase at the Presidential Library, God allows us to, no, rather, he wants us to use the gift, to enjoy the gift, to gain from it, to find purpose and meaning in life from it, and be a light unto the nations through its teachings. That is why he sent Abraham and Sarah sailing through the seas of history. And that's why we're still sailing. I love museums. They're wonderful. They're educational. But we are not a museum. Judaism is not a museum, it's alive. It's alive today. We're part of a living history, not a past history. A history that builds upon yesterday, that's inspired by yesterday, that's motivated by yesterday, but it lives on today. The ship never docked and never stopped. The stories of the Bible, billions of people are familiar with these stories. Movies and Broadway productions can't get enough of them. But it's our task to look beyond the drama, to try to get the message, understand what is being transmitted, and live with it, make it part of our daily existence. And so tonight we begin the story of Noah. And as I did when we did the story of creation in the fall semester, our focus here will not be the science of the flood. I'm not going to be getting into how was it possible? Is there any scientific proof? What happened to all the bodies? How did all the animals fit on the ark? All of these are fascinating subjects. They're good questions. They should be studied. They should be researched. But that's not the focus of this course. We're going to look at the story from the text and try to find what's the eternal message from the story itself. So let me set the scene for you. It's after the story of Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel's story did not end so well, at least not for Abel, not for Cain as well. He had a very difficult life after it. The Torah will then list the genealogy of Cain, and it will also mention some of their inventions. Remember, this is early man, it's early history. And the Torah will make mention of inventions as the world developed. It talks about someone named Conejo, who was the first to build a city. It talks about Yovel, who was the first to breed cattle. It talks about Yuval, who was into music and the first to create a harp and a flute. It talks about someone named Tuval Cain, who worked in metal and created swords and knives and weapons. The Torah also tells us that Adam and Eve had another son after Cain and Abel. His name was Seth. And then it lists all the genealogy of the children of Cain and the children of Seth. And what we discover by looking through the genealogy and looking through the text is that sadly the generations were getting progressively worse and worse in their conduct, in their behavior. Two crimes that are given primary coverage was stealing and raping. Those were the two major sins of early history: thievery and the raping of women. Let's start with reading number 1. Cain knew his wife. This comes from the text of the Torah. She conceived and gave birth to Enoch. Ada gave birth to Yovel. He was the ancestor of all those who live in tents and keep herds. His brother's name was Yuval. He was the ancestor of all who play the harp and flute. Tzila also had a son, Tuval Cain, a maker of all copper and iron implements. Adam knew his wife again, and she bore him a son and named him Seth. And as for Seth, to him was also born a son, and he named him Enosh. Then man began to profane the name of God. So early on, we begin to see the Torah talks about God's name being profaned. We also get a sense of inventions, of technology, and how it was improving. They were making rapid strides to bring about inventions that would enhance the human condition. We know that Noah himself, by the way, invented many farming techniques and tools. We're going to take a look now at reading 2 and 3 together. Reading 2, Lamech lived 182 years and begot a son, and he called his name Noah, saying, "This one will bring us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands, from the ground which God had cursed." Reading 3, In the beginning, they didn't know how to plant, harvest, or plow. They did all the farming by hand. When Noah came, he crafted tools of farming. So we begin to see two things developing at the same time: behavior, morality sinking, and inventions starting to really come forth. So while there were great advances being made in the technological aspect of the world, there was a decline in the moral state of the world. So I'd like to begin with the question. And the question is, are technological advances good for us or bad for us? And the answer, of course, is it depends. It depends what you use it for. Let's use some examples. Nuclear energy. Is it good or is it bad? Well, one can say we have so much energy from it. One could say nuclear weapons come from it. One can say, is nuclear weapons, is it good or bad? Did it end the war, or did it open up warfare and a race and warfare throughout the entire world? It's a great debate. Are we happier that it was invented, or would have we been better off if it was never invented at all? Then we would say, well, our fear was if we didn't come up with it, our enemies would come up with it. But what if we can say it would never be invented? Would we prefer that? Yes or no? We're not here to answer the question. We're here to pose the question. Let me throw another one at you. The cell phone, good or bad? I say, how can you live without it, right? But that in itself is the question. Is that good, that we have something that we can't live without? You ever been, I don't know, recently, but if you've ever been on a subway or a city bus or any public place, or even a restaurant. Remember, there used to be something called a restaurant where you would sit and you would eat and dine. How many people are talking to each other? How many people are on their cell phones? Even in one's own home at dinner, how many people are talking to one another? How many people are on their cell phones? Good or bad? I mean, I do remember, I don't think I'm that old, but I do remember life without a cell phone. I'm sure just about everyone on with us right now remembers that too. Wasn't that bad. Remember, you used to get messages on the tape recorder, right? You would come to your office, you would play a tape recorder, it would have beeps in between each message. You wrote down your messages and you went on with life. But when you left the office, whether it was 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, you left the office. You got your messages the next day when you came back in. Was that so bad? Cell phone, good or bad? It's a great discussion. Of course, the answer is going to be it depends. Let's pick another big one, the internet, good or bad? Again, most of you remember life before the internet. I remember when the internet came out. I remember going to our first workshop about the internet. I didn't understand what they were talking about, but they had this up on a big screen and they called it the World Wide Web. Life pre-internet. Remember, we used to have to look things up in the yellow pages or an encyclopedia, or go to some place called a library. Anyone remember the library? Remember those little drawers? You picked out a card, you had to look up to try to find a book. I mean, I remember learning this in like first or second grade, how to find Curious George books. And then I graduated to the Hardy Boys. I won't say that I read Nancy Drew as well, because guys weren't supposed to read Nancy Drew, but some of you remember the Nancy Drew books as well. As we went through school, we went to the library, and that's how we did our research. When we got into high school, we needed to do reports. We didn't have Google, right? Yeah, Curious George, whoever put that, those were great. This is how we lived. Google changed the world. The internet changed the world. It changed every aspect of our lives. Good or bad? It depends. It depends what you use it for. We can look at the automobile, good or bad. How many people die in car accidents? How do we get from one place to the next? How did we get from one place to the next before the automobile, before the airplane? So technology, advancement, change. Well, it's going to happen whether we debate it and we come up to a conclusion we prefer not. It's going to happen. See, generally, we say that advances are good. Technology advancement is good. It's a good thing. But being that man has free choice, man can utilize all of these advances for the negative. There's another spiritual problem with advancement and technology advancement. It begins to allow man to believe that they are the creators of the world. God didn't create the automobile or the airplane or antibiotics. Man did. And therefore, man is the ultimate think tank. Man is the ultimate creator. Little by little, what seems to happen in any society that has great advances is it slips away from God. It slips away from belief. It slips away from faith. It slips away from prayer, from need, from spirituality. It begins to allow its arrogance to get to our heads. The Torah gives us the statement, and it says, it will come a time when you'll have such advancement that you will say these words, and I'll say it to you in Hebrew and then translate it. Kochi ve'etzem yadi asa ezeh. My strength, my ingenuity created this. And that's the pitfall of technological advances. It helps facilitate the abandonment of spirituality. As people feel increasingly empowered by technological advances, they find it easier to deny God and to pursue their own ambitions. And this is why many Orthodox groups saw the development of technology as a spiritual threat to their family's way of life, or some saw it as a symptom of spiritual decline. Did you know that there were many that were opposed to the printing press? Many religious Jews were opposed to the printing press. You know why? Because they felt that the whole system of having to memorize the Talmud would be lost. If suddenly we have it in printed form, we're not going to memorize it as we did for thousands of years. A television, when it came out, and in many circles till this day, is called, in religious circles, avodah zarah, which means idol worship. The internet, when it came out, and in many circles till this day, is called schmutz. You know what schmutz means? Dirt, filth. There's so much dirt on the internet, and therefore they don't want their children ever going on it. You have to understand where the mindset is coming from. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, the leader of the Chabad movement, had a unique approach on technology. He saw it not as a weakening of generations, but he saw it as a tool that can help the weakened generation. It was not the cause, he said, it could be the solution. So the printing press is not only to be seen as the shifting from memory to press, but the ability to mass produce and disseminate material that until then were limited to but a few individuals. It was not just going to be a study that demanded a teacher in a classroom, but now with a printing press, we can read, we can study, we can teach all over the world because of the printing press. Because of the printing press, there's more Torah being studied than ever before. The television, we're not in favor of watching television on many fronts, but the fact that it's here, the fact that that technology is here, the Rebbe said, means that we have an ability to use it for the dissemination of a godly message, to use it for good. The internet. I mentioned going to that workshop years ago at a Chabad convention. The Rebbe appointed an emissary and declared him an emissary of Chabad of cyberspace when the internet first came out and most of us never heard about it, because he understood the power to it. If there is something that could reach every home in the world and we use it to teach Torah, could you imagine the power that we have there? Could there be bad? Of course there can. Can there be negativity? Of course. But there can also be so much good. Technology is God's gift and tool for assisting in the perfection of the world, but it's open for free choice. We need to decide how we're going to use it. At the same time, be aware and beware that it can also be a tool of arrogance and lead to a destruction of morality. Sputnik gave the Russians new confidence in the power of the Communist Party to take over the world. Non-democratic countries with nuclear power tend to become more evil, not less evil, with the arrogance of power. And so it goes both ways. In all of the questions that I threw out, the answer is it depends. It depends what the free choice of man will use this advancement for. But in every advancement, there is the possibility to utilize it for the good, both spiritually and to advance mankind. There's another source of such arrogance mentioned early on as we get into the story of Noah. And that's wealth, the arrogance of wealth. Let's take a look at reading number 4. The sages taught the generation of the flood became arrogant only because of the bounty with which God provided them. They said the only thing for which we depend on him is rain. We have rivers and springs that serve us plentifully. And so we don't really need him. God saying the very goodness with which I provided them, they use against me. I blessed them with all wealth, and now they're using it that they don't need me. But it's with that goodness that I'm going to punish them. Reading number 5. For the land to which you come to possess it, it is not like the land of Egypt that you have left, where you would plant your seed and water it on foot like a vegetable garden. But the land to which you cross over to possess it is a land of hills and valleys. From the rain of heaven will it drink water. God here, this is part of the Torah later on, post-book of Genesis, as God is preparing the Jewish people for the land of Israel. And he's saying the land of Israel is going to be different than the lands from which you came. The land of Egypt, there was water everywhere that came from the Nile. Not so is going to be in the land of Israel. A land that Hashem, your God, seeks out. The eyes of Hashem, your God, are always upon it from the beginning of the year to the year's end. It will be that if you hearken to my commandments that I command you today, to love God, your God, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, then I shall provide rain for your land in its proper time, the early and the late rains that you may gather in your grain, your wine, and your oil. I shall provide grass in your field for your cattle, and you will eat, and you will be satisfied. In his words, these are Moses' words to the Jewish people, and his final words, part of the book of Deuteronomy, which is what we study Wednesdays at 12:30, and you're all welcome to join me. Moses describes the influence of agricultural differences of the spiritual cultures of ancient Egypt and ancient Israel. Egypt was a country that depended on the Nile for irrigation. As a consequence, the Egyptians didn't accept the existence of a supernatural God. What was God for them? The Nile. If the Nile is having a good year and it overflows, then everything is great. If the Nile's having a bad year, then our crops don't grow. So it's all about the Nile. So they worship the Nile. The natural water source that was the visible cause of their agricultural bounty was the Nile. That's what they saw. So that's what they worshiped. Israel, however, is a land in which farming is dependent on rainfall. The land generated a culture that was more conducive to prayer. We need rain, let's pray. Dependence on God for sustenance. The geographical disadvantage of Israel was at the same time a great spiritual advantage. So although it didn't have the amount of water like the Nile, what it had was the fact that we needed rain, and therefore we needed God, and therefore we continued to pray. Remember, we also spoke about this when we spoke about in the fall semester about the serpent being cursed, that it will eat the dust of the earth. And we asked the question, what kind of curse is this? If it's going to eat the dust of the earth, it'll never need anything. And the answer is that it's not always a blessing to never need. It's important that we value things, that we value blessings, that we learn to appreciate, that we learn to pray, that we learn to connect, that we learn to deserve. We see a similar thing in the stories we'll have a little bit later in the stories about the cities of Sodom that God destroyed. They had wealth, they had green pastures, and yet they were utterly destroyed by God because they had no redeeming qualities. The Roman Empire, what caused their corruption and their ultimate breakdown was their wealth and their power. There's an opinion that faults the sin of the golden calf on the abundance of gold and silver that the Jewish people took out of Egypt. So, does this mean that wealth and money is bad? I'm sure you can find some philosophers that may say yes. I'm not one of them. I don't think money is bad. I wish I win the lottery. And if I'm not going to win the lottery, I wish you win the lottery. Why? Because then I'm going to solicit you for a very large contribution to help Chabad grow. I want to build a larger center. I want to build more synagogues. I have a lot of things I want to do. I want to help the homeless. I want to feed the poor. So I want to be wealthy. And if I can't be wealthy, I want all of you to be wealthy. I want all of you to go buy. I think that the lottery is like up there to like 800 million right now. One of those super things that go on throughout all the states. Go buy some tickets, please. Win. Pick good numbers. See, Judaism doesn't knock wealth. It doesn't despise wealth. It doesn't make money treif. Money is not non-kosher. It's glatt kosher. The question is what we do with it. There's a story of the first Chabad Rebbe, known as the Alter Rebbe. And there was a particular community, I believe it was a mikveh that they needed, and they didn't have the funds for it. So he went himself. He came to the community and he started door knocking to try to raise some money to help build a mikveh, to help build a Jewish school. So one of the fellows, sees the Rebbe himself is coming to him and he says, Rebbe, in Yiddish you say, es passt nicht, it's not fitting that you yourself send a fundraiser. You, the Rebbe himself, is going to come. Isn't money like schmutzig? Isn't money dirty? Isn't it like manure money that you, Rebbe, are going to come here to start collecting money? So the Rebbe says, yeah, it could be considered manure, but it's going to take some of that manure to build a mikveh. And that's why I'm here. You see, when God grants us material wealth, it's no less than a divine communication. He's talking to us through the wealth, because it can be a blessing if used for good. It can be a source of tsaris if used strictly for self. That choice is ours. We have free choice. God chose to use it to bring happiness to others, to bring spirituality to others, to bring food to others, to bring Judaism to others. He chose you with your wealth to do this, to be his partner. He could have chosen anyone else, but he picked you. So what's your answer to him? God, were you right in picking me or not? The answer is up to you. How you utilize it, how you see it, how you view that blessing of wealth. Why do you think God blessed you with wealth? Reading number 6. I have become small from all the favors and from all the trust. This comes from the book of Genesis. This means that with every single favor that God bestows upon a person, he ought to become more humble. For chesed, which means kindness, is referred to as the right arm. As scripture states, his right arm embraces me, which refers to God actually bringing the person closer to him far more intensely than before. And whoever is brought exceedingly close to God, being raised up to great heights, ought to be ever more humble. As it is known, all that are before him are esteemed as nothing. Hence, the more one is before him, whoever is closer to God is that much more like nothing, naught, and non-existent. The level of self-effacing response to divine favors is the level of the side of holiness. As Abraham said, and I am dust and ashes. The humility which is born of divine kindness is also the trait of Jacob. This was because Jacob regarded himself as utterly insignificant on account of the multitude of God's favors. It is different, though, with the unholy counterpart. The more kindness shown, the more he grows in pride, arrogance, and self-satisfaction. This is from the writings of Reb Shneur Zalman. And so he's saying the more one is blessed, the more humble one becomes, because one realizes God is communicating a message to you, and God is asking you to partner with him, which should make us feel more humble. So in an ideal world, God blesses every single one of you with wealth. Every week, another one of us will win the lottery or make a great deal or pick the right stock. And we will understand that if God communicates to us through wealth, we know what the answer is. So that ultimately it is his mission that will come first. And if so, he doesn't mind that we also spend some of ourselves. God doesn't mind that you have a nice house. God doesn't mind that you have nice clothing. God doesn't mind that you have nice jewelry. When COVID calms down, that you go on nice vacations. So long as you understand that the communication of the blessings of wealth is so that he wants you to use it for his causes as well. But if we lose sight of the bigger picture for which wealth was meant to be used, then we can fall prey to decadent impulses that can make wealth a catalyst for moral disaster. And it's these two things that open the story of Noah: technological advances and wealth. They're all both going on in early generations. There's something else that's going on, and we can say it's directly related. And that was idol worship. Maimonides has this long article in which he explains how idol worship first began. Let's take a look at it. It's reading number 7. During the times of Enosh, mankind made a great mistake. Their mistake was as follows. They said, God created stars and spheres with which to control the world. He placed them on high and treated them with honor, making them servants that minister before him. Accordingly, it is fitting to praise and glorify them and to treat them with honor. They perceived it to be the will of God that they magnify and honor that which he magnified and honored. Just as a king desires that the servants who stand before him be honored, indeed doing so is an expression of honor to the king. So they thought. After conceiving of this notion, they began to construct temples to the stars and offer sacrifices to them. They would praise and glorify them with words and prostrate themselves before them, because by doing so, they would, according to their false conception, be fulfilling the will of God. After many years passed, there arose false prophets who told the people that God had commanded them to say, serve this star or all the stars, sacrifice to it, offer libations to it, build a temple for it, make an image of it so that all people, including the women and children and the common people, could bow to it. People would gather together and bow down to them, and the false prophets would say, this image is the source of benefit or harm. It is appropriate to serve it and fear it. Their priests would tell them, this service will enable you to multiply and be successful. Do this and this, or do not do this or this. Subsequently, other deceivers arose and declared that a specific star or sphere or angel had spoken to them and commanded them, serve me in this manner. They would then relate a mode of service, telling them, do this and do not do this. Thus, these practices spread throughout the world. People would serve images with strange practices, one more distorted than the other, offer sacrifices to them, bow down to them. As the years passed, God's glorious and awesome name was forgotten by the entire population. It was no longer part of their speech or thought, and they no longer knew him. Thus, all the common people, the women and the children, knew only the image of wood or stone, and the temples of stone to which they were trained from their childhood to bow down and serve, and in whose name they swore. Those wise men among them thought that there was no God other than the stars and spheres, for whose sake and in resemblance of which they had made these images. The eternal rock was not recognized and known by anyone in the world, with the exception of a few individuals. For example, Hanoch, Methuselah, Noah, Shem, and Ever. The world continued in this fashion until the pillar of the world, the patriarch Abraham, was born, and that comes 10 generations after our story, the story of Noah. So the central error that gave rise to idol worship is that people attributed autonomy to the constellations and the forces of nature. Likewise, the rise of technology can also lead one to believe that we are autonomous, that we can function without divine revelation and intervention. The more we see the miracle and perfection of nature, the more we're challenged by the sight of what we call perfect puppets. They're moving so perfectly, and it's easy to forget that there's a puppeteer. You see, when there's a tsunami or a natural disaster, everyone then stops and thinks for a moment about God, his role. Did he have a role? Did he cause it? And if so, why? And every religion has something to say. Judaism has a lot to say as well. But Judaism's message is that God is not just in a tsunami wave, and he's not just in an earthquake, but he's in every sunrise. He's in every sunset. He's in every starry night, in every raindrop and every snowfall, in every river and in every ocean and in every existence. There is no Mother Nature. There is a puppeteer. There's someone pulling every string. It's too perfect to have come into an existence on its own. And it's too complex to be left without someone pulling the strings every single moment. That's the background. That's what leads to the story of Noah. I'm going to read to you, not with the text on the screen, but just the verse that introduces us to the era of the flood. And the verse is as follows. The men of God were taking the women of the earth, mikol asher bacharu, which means whoever they wanted to take. There was no choice from the takee, from the woman. They took any woman they wanted by force, and they did whatever they wanted to do to them. The verse said it was the men of God that were taking the women of earth. What does it mean, the men of God? Three possibilities. One, that the leaders themselves were doing it. The judges themselves were doing it. Leaders of communities were doing it. Those that called themselves by the name Elohim, the godly ones, which meant the powerful ones. Those looked up to. Number two means the God-fearing ones, even the good ones. The descendants of Seth that people looked at as more spiritual than the descendants of Cain, they too were in on it. And in another commentary written by someone, it's called the Moose Commentary, he writes that it came to pass when the children of God meant the children that were born by the godly spirit of law and order. The human being that was created in the image of God started seeing women as benos ha'adam, started seeing them merely as flesh, which meant when men stopped seeing women as fellow human beings, but saw them merely as flesh that they can do with as they pleased. At that point, God says, this can't continue. This will not go on. And in a very powerful verse that we'll begin with next week, God says he changes his mind. He regrets having made man. He regrets having given man free choice. The great philosophical question that we can ask, how can an infinite God regret? How can an infinite God change his mind if he's infinite? Questions to be asked next week. But we will continue to see now how this evil continues and what God decides to do about it, how he's going to change the world to bring about that indeed there can be hope for the future, that there can be goodness, that there can be the possibility of man utilizing free choice to do good. We'll continue next week, Monday evening, 7:30. Look forward to having all of you. This Wednesday at 12:30, we begin our class called The Chosen People. It's Moses' final, most powerful speech to the Jewish people, which makes up the book of Deuteronomy, the fifth of the 5 books of Moses. And you're all welcome to join me at 12:30. Someone's posting, do I take questions? Best is to email me your questions. Go to rabbi@chabadconejo.com. Send me any questions that you may have. I'll try to address it right away. If it's something that I feel we should address together in the class, I'll start off next week with your questions. So it's rabbi@chabadconejo.com. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care, everyone. Thanks so much for joining.